Hello, dear viewer. I'm glad to see you on this video. Make yourself comfortable. I'll play music with certain frequencies that are known to have a positive effect on our brain during meditation and sleep, so don't forget to subscribe. I don't have any ads in this video, so nothing will interfere with your deep dive into the halls of your mind. Today we'll talk about something very interesting and significant for our galaxy. I've prepared this video for you, so you can thank me with a like. Get ready. The night it appeared, the sky didn't change colour. There was no flash, no ripple of light across the horizon, just silence. An almost imperceptible shift, as if the stars had inhaled at once. For weeks, telescopes swept the darkness, mapping the faint trail of a stranger crossing into our solar system. The observatories gave it a name, 3I Atlas, the third confirmed visitor from beyond the sun's dominion. But names are small things compared to what they represent. When the first numbers came in, no one celebrated. The data was too clean, the trajectory too precise. This wasn't the wild tumble of a random interstellar rock. It moved as if it remembered where it was going. Astronomers in Chile watched it slice across the field of their telescopes, a glittering ember against the backdrop of infinity. To most, it was just another curiosity, a mathematical event. To a few, it felt like a question whispered across light years. It wasn't our first encounter with something that didn't belong here. In 2017, Oumuamua, the first interstellar object, had already brushed our cosmic doorstep. It arrived uninvited and left us with riddles we still couldn't solve. Then came Borisov, a comet behaving just as comets should, a comforting reminder that not everything from the dark was mysterious. But 3I Atlas, it didn't fit either story. It came in fast and cold, glowing with a pale blue hue that deepened as it turned toward the sun. Blue, the colour of calm, of depth, of deception. At first, its brightness suggested something massive, maybe a nucleus several kilometres wide. But when the Hubble telescope captured its faint shimmer on July 21st, the results were baffling. The core was too small, too compact to produce such light. A contradiction hung in the data like static. Too much energy, too little matter. That's how the first whisper began. It's not just a comet. News spread quickly through the scientific world. Observatories recalibrated. Algorithms retraced its orbit. Theories splintered and multiplied. Some said it was just volatile ice behaving unpredictably. Others saw something stranger, a pattern in its motion that suggested intent. The public barely noticed at first. To them, space was full of marvels anyway, black holes, dying stars, exoplanets. But to those who watched the skies for a living, 3I Atlas was different. It didn't drift like debris, it arrived. Imagine that for a moment, something crossing the gulf between stars, surviving radiation, gravity wells, and cosmic dust, only to slide perfectly into our neighbourhood. Statistically, the odds are almost non-existent, and yet, here it was, tracing an orbit that looked less like coincidence and more like choreography. For astronomers, the days became a rhythm of sleepless nights and blinking monitors. Each update brought new confusion. The object's acceleration didn't follow Newtonian predictions. It wasn't falling toward the sun, it was leaning toward it, as if drawn not by gravity, but by choice. Some blamed sublimation of frozen gases. Others whispered about propulsion. Officially, no one dared say the word artificial. Unofficially, the word hung in every room like a shadow no one wanted to acknowledge. Still, the numbers didn't lie. As the object approached, it began to brighten exponentially, reflecting more light than its size could explain. By all accounts, it should have been faint, a speck barely visible. Instead, it grew into a blue ember, stretching across the void. The more light it gave, the less sense it made. Scientists began pulling old data from the archives, previous passes, background noise, unconfirmed detections from years before. Some thought it might be a fragment from another system's collapse, a fossil of creation flung through space. Others speculated it was something far rarer, an interstellar messenger, not sent but released. The line between science and philosophy started to blur, as it often does when humanity faces something it cannot categorize. And yet, through all the data, there was one constant: a feeling. Quiet, collective unease. Because deep down, we recognized a pattern older than our instruments, the same pull that ancient civilizations felt when they saw a new star rise where none had been before. A feeling that something had come for us. By mid-July, major observatories around the world synchronized their watches. Atlas was approaching its first close pass. The projections showed a trajectory threading perfectly through the inner solar system, close enough for analysis, too fast for interception. NASA's analysts were cautious. The European Space Agency was intrigued. And the public? Still sleeping beneath the same quiet stars, unaware that the night sky now contained a visitor from another sun. You can imagine the mood among the scientists, the thrill of proximity mixed with dread. Every new reading tore a hole in the old models. Every image contradicted the last. It was like watching a magician whose tricks you almost understand, but not quite. Something in that movement, smooth, deliberate, unhurried, defied randomness. When a body moves through space, it leaves behind a trail of dust, vapor, debris. Atlas left something subtler: structure. Jets of material shaped like threads, perfectly symmetrical, expanding at measured intervals. It was too early to tell what caused them, but already the whispers grew louder. This wasn't chaos. This was design. Still, science holds to evidence, not wonder. So they measured. They calculated the possible density, the reflectivity, the angular momentum. None of it matched the known profiles of comets or asteroids. The surface seemed reflective in a peculiar way, not icy, but metallic. The brightness curve was uneven, as though panels or facets were catching sunlight at precise angles. And so, quietly, behind the equations and press briefings, a question began to form. What if this isn't just another interstellar traveller? What if it's observing us, even as we observe it? There's a strange symmetry in that, the watcher being watched, as if across the gulf of space, a mirror had turned toward us for the first time. Perhaps this was what humanity had always longed for, proof that the void could answer back. But the answer, when it comes, is rarely what we expect. The night before its closest pass that summer, telescopes recorded an unexplainable fluctuation, a shimmer like a heartbeat through static. Then nothing. The readings flattened, the light steadied, and 3i Atlas continued on its way, silent and self-assured. In every sense, it was behaving like something that knew it was being watched. For now, the world slept, the scientists waited, and the object, that pale, patient spark, kept gliding through the darkness, leaving behind a question that no equation could solve. What had entered our skies wasn't just another piece of wandering rock. It was a story written in motion, and we had only just begun to read the first line. The object drifted closer, and the silence around it grew louder. It was the kind of quiet that doesn't belong in space. Not emptiness, but expectation. The data kept arriving, each new stream more confusing than the last. Something about its acceleration was wrong. Not dramatically, not violently, but precisely wrong, as if the laws of motion had been rewritten by an unseen hand. Normally, comets fall toward the sun, pulled like everything else by the weight of its gravity. But 3I Atlas didn't just fall, it adjusted. It curved against the predictable arc, as if responding to a signal we couldn't hear. There was no explosion, no sudden flare, only a steady, deliberate change in speed, like a pilot tapping thrusters in the dark. At first, the numbers seemed like instrument error, but then the Hubble and JWST confirmed them. The acceleration was real, small, subtle, and utterly impossible. To cause such a push naturally, it would need to be shedding material at a rate that should have torn it apart. Yet there it was, intact, calm, gleaming blue. Blue, that colour again. The hue deepened as it neared the sun, shifting from icy silver to sapphire. Most comets grow redder as their dust and gas scatter sunlight, but Atlas grew colder in tone. Bluer, cleaner, unnatural. It was as if it were reflecting not light, but intention. Spectroscopic data from the JWST painted a stranger picture still. The tail wasn't dominated by water or carbon monoxide, the usual suspects, but by carbon dioxide and nickel compounds, and in proportions that made no sense. And surrounding it all, a colossal cloud, a coma nearly 350,000 kilometers wide, larger than the planet Neptune. Too large for an object barely a mile across. Too much presence for something so small. Scientists argued. Some claimed it was an ancient fragment from a dying solar system packed with exotic ices. Others proposed it was a rubble pile, a cluster of fragments moving as one. Yet even those theories couldn't explain the geometry of its emissions. From certain angles, the jets seemed to align with its motion. Not random bursts from spinning ice, but structured patterns, like nozzles firing in synchronization. Each jet ejected material along the same axis, as though part of a system. The pattern repeated over hours, not days. You could almost mistake it for rhythm. Imagine that, rhythm, in a body of ice and stone born between the stars. The data teams began running thermal models, trying to make sense of the heat and gas emissions. Every version broke under its own contradictions. The energy output was too steady, the loss of mass too smooth. A natural object should sputter, flare, fluctuate, but Atlas performed like a machine maintaining equilibrium, and that's when the whisper became louder. Not in the reports or the conferences, but in the unspoken spaces between them. Scientists who spent their careers avoiding speculation began to feel it creeping in, the sense that this wasn't simply physics anymore, it was choreography. Still, no one dared to say it aloud. The world had mocked those who once suggested Oumuamua might have been artificial. The wounds of ridicule still lingered, so instead of words, they hid behind equations, behind anomalous data points and outlier phenomena. The truth was simpler and far more terrifying. The universe was doing something we didn't understand, and it had chosen to do it right in front of us. At observatories around the globe, people stayed past their shifts. Screens glowed in the dim light, showing the same impossible trend, a faint, constant thrust that defied every model of natural cometary activity. As the days passed, the object began to brighten at an exponential rate. What had started as a pale spark now flared with reflected sunlight, burning like an ember that refused to die. Some compared it to a lantern drifting through the cosmic night. Others said it looked like a heartbeat pulsing against the black. And maybe that was what frightened us the most, because to see rhythm is to sense purpose. And to sense purpose is to wonder who or what set it in motion. By late summer, as it reached its perihelion, the energy readings peaked. If this were a comet, the sunlight should have boiled its surface into chaos. Instead, it grew more defined. Its core stayed stable. The jets formed symmetrical arcs, converging into what looked from some angles like wings. No one believed it, not really, but when images started circulating, those shimmering arcs extending outward, the sharp glints where light caught a mirrored surface. Disbelief didn't make it any less real. The data didn't lie, even when it looked like poetry. Somewhere in that blue glow, our instruments detected a pulse, a tiny variation in reflectivity that repeated every 12.4 hours. Too precise to be coincidence, too faint to decode. Some called it a rotation period, others called it a signal. The line between those two ideas grew thinner with every orbit it completed. All the while, the world below remained mostly silent. The news barely mentioned it. Humanity had its own crises: wars, heat waves, collapsing systems. But in observatories and labs, something ancient stirred in the hearts of those watching, awe laced with fear. Because if 3I Atlas was natural, it was the most extraordinary natural object ever recorded. And if it wasn't, then we were no longer alone, not in the philosophical sense, not in the abstract hope of SETI experiments, but literally, in motion, in proximity, in real time. And maybe that's why no one wanted to speak it aloud, because the moment you name a miracle, it stops being one. The data streams continued through the nights, each image more vivid, each measurement more impossible. A sense of momentum grew, not just in the object, but in us, as though humanity itself were being drawn towards something inevitable, something waiting beyond the edge of understanding. And as the blue light of Atlas deepened, a realization began to dawn in the quiet corners of every lab. What we were witnessing might not be the behavior of matter at all, but the behavior of message. When something refuses to make sense, the human mind does what it always does. It looks for patterns. By late July, the models for 3I Atlas had collapsed under their own contradictions. The object's brightness kept growing, yet its visible size remained stubbornly small. The only way the math could balance was if the light wasn't coming from a single body at all. That's when the first simulations appeared. Quietly, in shared folders between research teams, astronomers began sketching a radical hypothesis. Maybe the nucleus of 3I Atlas wasn't one object, but many, fragments bound together, drifting in tight formation like a flock of metallic birds. 16 of them, give or take. It explained too much to ignore. The energy output, the steady acceleration, the stability in rotation, all of it fell into place if the original body had fractured into smaller pieces, each one reflecting sunlight and releasing gas in coordination. 16 fragments meant 16 active surfaces, 16 sources of propulsion. Together they produced the power of something far larger than the eye could see. But if that was true, another question followed. When did it break apart? The Hubble images showed no recent explosion, no debris cloud, no violent shedding of mass. The pieces, if they existed, weren't drifting chaotically. They moved together, held not by gravity, but by something gentler, something disciplined, like dancers who no longer need to look at each other to keep in step. In the silence of data, that image haunted every scientist who saw it, because natural systems don't do that. Nature is beautiful, yes, but it's rarely neat. A comet that breaks apart should scatter like a burst of glass, not form a synchronized pattern that glides perfectly through sunlight. And yet, that's what the numbers said. Some tried to anchor the theory in normal physics. Maybe the fragments were connected by thin filaments of dust, or by electrostatic attraction. Maybe they were the remnants of a single rotating nucleus that had split along lines of internal weakness. But even then, why 16? Why such precision? Dr. Lira, one of the analysts at the European Space Observatory, wrote a note in her report that later went viral among scientists. Just 5 words, half a joke, half confession. If it's art, it's perfect. It was meant as humour, but it captured something no data point could express. The feeling that this object wasn't just behaving, it was performing. The next set of JWST readings deepened the riddle. The spectral analysis showed traces of nickel, iron and CO2, but distributed unevenly, almost patterned, as if the composition varied deliberately across different regions. That shouldn't happen in a random fragmentation. A comet doesn't plan where to hide its elements. Every new answer birthed more questions, each one sharper than the last. If the fragments really were separate, they must have some way of maintaining formation. If they were connected, by what force? If not gravity, then what? And if there was coordination, who was doing the coordinating? For the public, these details didn't matter yet, but inside the closed circles of research, unease began to solidify into something heavier, quiet dread. Because if the fragments were acting as a collective, then 3R Atlas wasn't a comet anymore, it was a system, and systems by definition have rules. In early August, a few bold voices started to test the unthinkable. What if the fragments weren't debris at all, but components? Pieces of something greater, an array, a structure, a vessel dismantled for travel, each fragment reflecting light like a panel, each jet firing as part of a design. It sounded like science fiction, but so had everything about this object since day one. No one wanted to be the first to say it publicly. They hid behind metaphors, coordinated behavior, cohesive motion, non-random acceleration. But they all knew what those words meant. The possibility hung in the air like static before a storm. This might be built. Of course, skepticism fought back. Other teams argued the opposite, that the 16 fragments were nothing more than optical artifacts, illusions of perspective created by the tail's brightness and the camera's angle. A trick of light, nothing more. But that explanation demanded an even greater leap of faith, because in science, illusions rarely repeat themselves with mathematical precision. By mid-August, the debate had become an unspoken war. One camp clung to the safety of natural chaos. The other stood at the edge of the unknown, looking into the possibility of intention. Neither side was entirely comfortable with what they believed. Outside those sterile rooms filled with glowing monitors, the night sky remained indifferent. Atlas kept moving, patient and unbothered. When telescopes tracked its rotation again, the data showed something eerie. The supposed fragments weren't tumbling. They were rotating together at the same rate, like parts of a single invisible wheel, a unity beneath the illusion of separation. That detail shouldn't have been possible. But then so many things about 3I Atlas weren't. Scientists started calling it the swarm, half in jest, half in surrender. The name stuck. The swarm's combined surface area finally explained the excess brightness. The numbers lined up almost perfectly. 16 pieces, each small, but together large enough to account for the energy balance. It was elegant, almost too elegant, the kind of elegance that nature rarely bothers with, but intelligence often demands. And somewhere between the numbers and the silence, a thought took root, quiet, fragile, and frightening in its simplicity. Maybe this isn't one object visiting us. Maybe it's 16 eyes watching. From that moment on, every observation carried a different weight. Every image felt personal. When the blue shimmer brightened again, someone whispered in the control room, "It's looking back." No one corrected them, because by then everyone had begun to feel it, that strange ancient pressure of being observed. And as the swarm drifted closer to the sun, the light around it fractured into beams that bent and shimmered like mirrors catching breath. The 16 points danced, and for the briefest moment, their reflections aligned in perfect symmetry. 16 shadows moving as one. No one could prove what held them together or what drove them onward. But one thing was certain. If it was coincidence, it was the most beautiful coincidence the universe had ever made. And if it wasn't, then somewhere, far beyond the silence, someone had built beauty into motion. By the time 3I Atlas reached the inner edge of the solar system, its transformation was undeniable. What began as a silent spark had become a spectacle of geometry, a sculpture of light and motion. The coma swelled to planetary scale, and from its heart stretched a tail that refused to behave. Normally, a comet's tail flows away from the sun, a simple dance of radiation and dust. But this one bent the wrong way. A second plume, thin and deliberate, extended toward the sun, an anti-tail, shimmering like a filament of glass. It made no physical sense. No model could explain it without twisting the laws of reflection themselves. Astronomers tried to simulate it. They fed their computers every variable they could imagine: solar wind, plasma fields, electric charge. But the simulations broke. The tail behaved as if guided by something unseen, aligning and realigning in defiance of every predictable force. And then came the images. From ground-based observatories and orbital telescopes alike, they showed narrow streams of material. Jets so straight, so sharp, they looked drawn with a ruler. Some stretched for millions of kilometers, thin as lines of thread. They pulsed with faint rhythm, flickering like breathing. Nature in all its chaos does not usually draw lines like that. The pattern resembled the spokes of a wheel, radiating outward, precise and calm. From one angle, it looked like propulsion. From another, like art. And between those two interpretations hung the question that defined every night of observation. Who teaches a comet to paint? No one dared to say it publicly, but whispers filled the silence between data bursts. Maybe the tail wasn't a byproduct. Maybe it was a message. It wouldn't be the first time humanity mistook communication for beauty. The lines carved into deserts, the pulse of radio signals, the symmetry of crystals. We always see order and wonder if someone left it there for us to find. Yet this time the order was alive, evolving with every orbit. The tail moved not as a reaction, but as a gesture. And gestures, even in the cold vacuum of space, imply will. For weeks the jets remained steady, too steady. They flared at equal intervals, always from the same coordinates, as though the object were maintaining its own balance. When one stream faded, another ignited elsewhere, perfectly compensating for momentum. It was like watching a breathing mechanism regulate itself. The light scattered off the streams created luminous arcs that shimmered against the void, each one bending with the sun's radiation but never breaking. Observers described it as graceful, even hypnotic. But behind that grace was something colder, precision. Each motion seemed intentional, each flare measured. And that word, intentional, carried weight, because intention meant control. And control meant someone or something was deciding how this object behaved. Late one night, a series of long exposure images revealed something stranger still. The anti-tail flickered with a pulse. Not a constant light, but a heartbeat, bright, dim, repeating every few hours. It wasn't a natural oscillation. It followed too clean a rhythm, like an engine compensating for pressure. It was the kind of rhythm a machine makes when it breathes. In labs across the world, silence became the only honest reaction. The more they saw, the less they understood. 3i Atlas seemed to defy its role as a passenger of the cosmos. It behaved like a traveler aware of its destination. Some scientists started referring to the jets as thrusters, quietly, nervously. Others rejected the idea outright, insisting that coincidence could mimic order. But even they couldn't look at those perfect columns of light and fully believe their own words. As the days passed, something shifted in the global mood. For the first time, the public began to notice. Images of the blue object spread across news feeds, that luminous tail stretching both toward and away from the sun, defying logic and evoking awe. People called it beautiful. Others called it a warning. It became a symbol, a mirror for whatever humanity chose to see. For some, it was proof of art in the universe, the hand of a creator writing with light. For others, it was the first sign of presence, of company. And yet, through all the speculation, the object itself remained silent, its symmetry unchanged, its pulse steady. It neither confirmed nor denied our dreams. It only kept moving, unwavering, serene, deliberate. By early September, the jets began to fade, one by one, leaving behind a faint phosphorescent trail that stretched like a ribbon through the dark. Observers compared it to a whisper dissolving into silence, a breath that never quite ended. Whatever force had driven it, whatever had sculpted that impossible geometry, had done what it came to do. The tail that refused the light slowly bent back into alignment with the sun, as though bowing, not to gravity, but to something older. And for a fleeting moment, as its luminous strands shimmered across the instruments, the data registered a final flicker. A brief coordinated pulse, 16 points, shining in sequence. A farewell or a signal? No one could tell. But as the glow dissolved into the solar wind, one thing became clear. We were not just observing a comet. We were witnessing choreography written in light, a message that would lead us deeper into its secret heart, At some point, the numbers stopped agreeing with the universe. For weeks, the data teams had been patching over inconsistencies, minor deviations in acceleration, thermal output, brightness. But by late September, the gap between theory and reality had widened into something unbridgeable. The energy coming from 3I Atlas simply didn't make sense. According to every law of physics, the amount of sunlight hitting that tiny body could never produce the activity it displayed. The jets, the glow, the coma, all of it demanded more energy than the sun was giving. And yet, the object continued to blaze, serene and balanced, like a candle burning in vacuum without fuel. They ran the numbers again. Even with the most generous assumptions, ultra-reflective surfaces, volatile ices, perfectly efficient sublimation, the math fell short by a factor of 6. To sustain the observed outflow of gas, the object would need to absorb sunlight across a surface area far greater than what Hubble's measurements allowed. In simple terms, it was too small to be this alive. One researcher described it bluntly in a private memo. Either we've misunderstood thermodynamics or this thing is cheating. Cheating, the word lingered like static in the data stream. If it wasn't a comet, if it wasn't a rock, then what was powering it? The first alternative models were desperate, beautiful things. Equations bent into shapes they were never meant to hold. Some invoked exotic ices, others proposed internal nuclear decay. A few dared to sketch models of mirror-like surfaces focusing sunlight inward, amplifying it the way a lens turns warmth into flame. But those models raised another question. Why? Why would a natural body optimize itself so perfectly, as if designed to make the most of every photon? Nature loves balance, but it doesn't strive for efficiency. Efficiency belongs to purpose, and purpose belongs to design. By October, as 3I Atlas neared its closest pass to the Sun, the paradox became unbearable. The energy it emitted should have torn it apart. The outgassing alone would have shattered any known structure. Yet the object remained calm, symmetrical, even graceful. It didn't flicker. It didn't lose mass. It simply existed, effortlessly, in defiance of physics. Observatories reported another anomaly. Despite the immense gas release, there was almost no deceleration. The jets should have acted like tiny rockets, slowing or pushing the fragments apart. Instead, the swarm held steady, as if the energy was being redirected inward, controlled, channeled, restrained. Something was managing the chaos. That phrase began appearing in papers, always hedged with qualifiers. Regulated sublimation, internal cohesion mechanism, non-random distribution. But everyone knew what it meant. The object wasn't just stable, it was self-stabilizing. The idea was unbearable because it implied autonomy. The more scientists tried to explain it, the stranger it became. The light curves showed that when solar radiation increased, the object's brightness decreased. When radiation waned, it brightened again. It was as if it were reacting, compensating, maintaining equilibrium like a living organism keeping its temperature constant. A few dared to whisper the unthinkable. Feedback. Something was responding to the environment, measuring, adjusting, but no one knew what. For every skeptic dismissing it as coincidence, another pointed to the impossible harmony of the data. The laws we trusted weren't failing. They were being rewritten in real time, line by line, by something that understood them better than we did. It was around this time that the philosophical questions began. If a system can regulate itself, does that make it alive? If it reacts with intention, does that make it aware? And if it preserves itself in the face of entropy, does that make it intelligent or simply inevitable? Somewhere between science and faith, the line blurred. In one late-night briefing, a researcher from Caltech reportedly said, "If this thing had eyes, it would be looking back." The room fell silent, not because anyone believed it, but because everyone already did. Meanwhile, the world began to notice. Images of the bright blue object flooded social media. A small, perfect star with a tail like silk. Headlines called it the ghost of the galaxy. Others called it the Mirror Comet. But among the few who knew the truth, the scientists who had seen the real data, the feeling was no longer wonder. It was humility. Because for the first time, humanity had stumbled upon something that didn't need our understanding to exist. It didn't fit our equations, but it didn't fight them either. It simply moved through them like water around a stone, bending the current and continuing onward, unbothered. What if, one physicist asked, we're not observing a thing at all, but a process? Something designed not to last forever, but to perform a function and then vanish. What function? No one knew. Some speculated it was collecting energy, converting sunlight into something unseen. Others thought it might be shedding information, a beacon not for us, but for something farther away. And then an unsettling possibility emerged. What if the excess energy wasn't coming from the sun at all? What if it was leaving the object, being given away rather than absorbed? That flipped the narrative entirely. 3I Atlas wasn't feeding, it was giving, radiating heat, light, data, something, into space, deliberately, rhythmically, as though performing an ancient ritual. A civilization doesn't just build machines that take, it builds those that share. And what we were seeing might have been an act of cosmic generosity, or cosmic indifference. Because energy, like intention, only means something to those who can interpret it. If it truly was releasing power, then it was writing across the void, leaving trails of entropy as sentences, patterns of radiation as words. We didn't yet know how to read them, but the pattern was there. 16 pulses repeating every few hours. Faint, perfect, persistent, not random, not noise, a signature. By the time Atlas curved around the sun, the last doubts had faded. The calculations were useless now, beautiful equations shattered against the smooth indifference of reality. Whatever it wasn't obeying us. And as it re-emerged from the blinding light, untouched, unchanged, still glowing blue, one truth became impossible to ignore. We were no longer the ones measuring the universe. The universe was measuring us. After Atlas passed the sun, the instruments came alive again. Every radio dish, every optical array, every eye that could see beyond the blue haze turned toward it. The object had survived the inferno intact, its symmetry unbroken, its light unaltered. To scientists, that alone was a miracle. To everyone else, it was something more. It was endurance. Nothing should have made it through that close to the sun without tearing apart. Yet there it was, colder, bluer, and more deliberate than before. And as it emerged from the glare, the 16 pulses returned, faint but undeniable. A pattern, a rhythm, a voice. SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, had been waiting for this moment for decades, but not like this. They were trained to listen for radio signals, for digital noise buried in cosmic static. This wasn't that. This was geometry, light, and timing, communication written in behavior, not broadcast. The first reports called it modulated reflectivity. Others labelled it periodic spectral shifts. But everyone knew what they were looking at. Something was sending information, not in words or code, but in the universal language of physics. The message, if it was one, didn't speak. It demonstrated. It showed control, consistency, intent. At the Harvard-Smithsonian Center, someone whispered what everyone was thinking. It's saying, "I'm still here." That line spread through the scientific networks like wildfire. I'm still here. Simple, human, and terrifying. No one could agree whether the pulses were intelligent or just the byproduct of rotation. But even the skeptics couldn't explain how the timing had become so exact. Each pulse synchronized to within a fraction of a second, sustained for days. The odds of randomness were smaller than the odds of existence itself. If it was a coincidence, it was one the universe had practiced. Avi Loeb, the same physicist who once dared to suggest Oumuamua might have been artificial, resurfaced in headlines. He spoke cautiously now, but his words cut through the noise. If you send a bottle into the ocean, you don't know who will find it. Maybe this is the moment we found one. The idea struck like lightning. Not a transmission, but a relic. A probe. A fragment of something ancient crossing time as easily as space. It didn't need to speak. Its mere existence was the message. Some called it a cosmic archive, a traveling library that gathers and releases information across civilizations. Others said it might be an automated observer, studying solar systems like seeds in a garden. But a few, the poets among scientists, said something different. They said it might be an invitation. Because the pattern of pulses wasn't just steady, it was recursive. Every 16 cycles the rhythm reset, as if waiting for an answer. And that's when the question began to haunt the world. What if it's listening? Governments grew nervous. For decades, SETI had broadcast messages toward the stars. The Arecibo message, the Pioneer plaque, the Voyager record. All of them small, hopeful whispers into infinity. What if this was the whisper returning? What if we had already been answered and only now realized it? The media erupted, but the scientists didn't sleep. They replayed every dataset, every reflection, every trace of motion. Some found symmetry in the timing. Others saw a mathematical ratio that repeated through the jets, a proportion echoing the golden section. Coincidence, perhaps, but coincidence is just another name for a pattern we don't yet understand. And as the object drifted outward again, a sense of collective recognition spread through humanity, the feeling that the universe had noticed us. It wasn't a roar of discovery, it was a whisper of acknowledgement. For the first time, the night sky didn't feel silent, it felt aware. Astronomers debated endlessly what to do. Should we respond? Could we? How does one answer an object made of light and motion? Some proposed firing a laser signal toward its trajectory. Others warned against it. Don't talk to strangers, they joked, half serious, half terrified. The irony was inescapable. After half a century of sending messages into space, we now hesitated to speak back. Because now someone might actually be listening. Still, the idea was too intoxicating to resist. A group of independent researchers in Chile tried anyway, firing a low-intensity light pulse into the void, matching the timing of Atlas's rhythm. They expected nothing, but for 12 minutes the pattern changed. Not dramatically, not obviously, just enough. The pulse drifted by a fraction, a hesitation, a breath between beats. Coincidence, said the official reports. Instrumental delay, said NASA. But to those who watched the signal live, it felt like eye contact. And once you felt that silent acknowledgement between two unknown minds, you can't unfeel it. Philosophers began calling it the moment. The instant humanity realized it might not be the first to look up. Religious leaders offered prayers. Scientists offered models. Artists painted blue tails and 16 points of light. And through it all, the object kept moving. Patient, steady, impartial. It didn't demand belief. It didn't seek worship. It simply was. And in that stillness, a strange comfort grew. Maybe it wasn't here to speak. Maybe it was here to remind us that someone, somewhere, once could. That we weren't alone in trying to understand the infinite. And maybe in some quiet way, the object was proof that understanding isn't necessary for connection. For in every sense that mattered, 3i Atlas had already become part of us. Our thoughts, our fears, our hopes, our math. It had woven itself into the collective imagination of a planet. We named it, we studied it, we doubted it, and it watched us do all three without judgment. That's what unnerved people the most, the absence of reaction. Because reaction is human. Observation is divine. The object was neither loud nor passive. It existed in that impossible middle, an equilibrium of mystery and purpose, and in that it reflected us more than we realized. Maybe that's why we couldn't stop watching, because deep down everyone felt it. If this was communication, then humanity wasn't just receiving a signal. It was part of one. And somewhere, across time and distance, someone or something might already be listening to the echo of our awe. The stars, after all, have long memories, and perhaps for the first time they decided to speak back. There was no reason for an interstellar object to arrive now at this exact moment in human history, and yet it had. It entered our solar system not in a century of wonder, but in an age of exhaustion, when our species was busy fracturing itself across screens, borders, and illusions of control. The timing was almost poetic, and that's what frightened people the most. Scientists avoid poetry. They cling to probability. But probability offers no comfort when coincidence begins to look like choreography. 3i Atlas appeared at the height of our noise, when we had filled our planet with signals, satellites, debris, and prayers. It threaded silently through that chaos, immaculate and indifferent. While we argued about the meaning of existence, something from the void simply showed up. And somehow that simplicity felt like judgment. For centuries, humanity had stared at the sky asking questions. But questions are safe when no one answers. The arrival of Atlas broke that safety. It didn't bring words or warnings, only reflection. It showed us what we looked like through the eyes of the universe. Noisy, brilliant, fragile. The object didn't destroy our faith in science, it restored our faith in silence. There were theories, endless, desperate theories, but the deeper they went, the more they circled back to one truth. It came now because this was when we were ready to notice. Maybe not ready to understand, but ready to see. Some argued that this was projection, humanity's old habit of turning the cosmos into a mirror. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the universe has always spoken in mirrors, forcing us to confront ourselves before daring to meet anything else. The philosophers called it the threshold, the point in evolution where a civilization stops asking whether it's alone and begins to ask whether it deserves not to be. That question spread faster than any signal ever could. It appeared in classrooms, in sermons, in hushed conversations between people who had never cared about space before. The idea that maybe, just maybe, something had chosen this moment to remind us of scale, to remind us how small we are and how much smaller our hatred looks from orbit. In those months, something shifted on Earth. News anchors began mentioning the object with reverence instead of novelty. Musicians wrote about it. Poets found language again. And in the background, governments quietly panicked. Because what if it wasn't coincidence? What if this wasn't discovery, but visitation? Diplomats began drafting contingency plans, not for invasion, but for conversation. SETI and NASA prepared statements in case contact became undeniable. The irony, of course, was that the contact had already happened. We were already changed. The object hadn't spoken, but it had altered the gravity of human thought. The centre of our curiosity shifted outward. For once, we looked up not to conquer, but to listen. And in that act of listening, something ancient awakened. The same instinct that once made us paint stars on cave ceilings, the same longing that built cathedrals of glass and radio telescopes. It wasn't fear anymore. It was yearning. If this was a message, then perhaps it wasn't for one generation, but for all of them. The kind of message that only makes sense when you look back centuries later and realize what it was trying to teach. Some scientists began to describe Atlas not as an object, but as a teacher, not because it instructed us, but because it demanded humility. It forced us to remember how little we actually know, and that in itself was a form of education. When the news finally reached the public that the object would pass closest to Earth in December, millions began to prepare in their own ways. Some built makeshift observatories on rooftops. Others travelled to dark deserts just to glimpse it. People who had never looked through a telescope before learned to trace its faint blue streak across the night. For a few brief months, humanity was united by wonder, not ideology, not profit, not war, just wonder. That might have been the real purpose all along, because sometimes the message isn't in what's said, but in what it makes you feel. The object didn't need to tell us to stop destroying ourselves. Its mere presence reminded us that destruction was optional, that survival wasn't the same as living. In the long quiet between data transmissions, scientists began to say something strange in their notes, something halfway between confession and hope. Maybe it came to see if we're still trying. And in those words, something beautiful broke open. Because maybe the universe doesn't reward intelligence with contact. Maybe it rewards persistence, the stubborn refusal to give up on meaning. If so, then 3I, us Atlas, hadn't come to judge us. It had come to measure us, to see if we were still capable of curiosity, the one trait that makes us more than noise. And if curiosity was the test, maybe, just maybe, we had passed. By late November, the object's glow began to wane, its path bending outward again toward the stars. But before it faded, a new pulse appeared, not brighter, but slower. It lingered, like a farewell wave stretched across the dark. Somewhere in the data logs, one technician wrote, "It's leaving, but not gone." And that's how it felt, because when something vast touches your reality, It doesn't truly leave. It just changes what distance means. The stars hadn't come closer, we had. And maybe that was the point all along. Not in fear, not yet, but in curiosity, that fragile emotion we mistake for courage. Because behind every great discovery, there's always the quiet dread of realizing that the universe might be more interested in us than we are in it. No one said it outright, but the thought crept into every conversation, every lab, every dream. Maybe Three-Eye Atlas wasn't just a messenger. Maybe it was a mirror, reflecting what we were willing to believe about ourselves. If it was a probe, it could have gathered everything by now. Radio chatter, electromagnetic noise, data leaks, memories of a species that never learned to whisper. We'd left our secrets scattered across space like breadcrumbs, satellites, transmissions, digital ghosts. If someone wanted to know us, they already did. So the real question wasn't what it wanted, it was why it came in person. Some said it was curiosity, the same force that drove us to send Voyager and Pioneer into the unknown. Others said it was compassion, perhaps an older civilization checking in on its younger cousin before it destroyed itself. But there was a darker theory too, one that spoke not of contact, but of curation. What if we weren't being visited, but collected? It wasn't a new fear. Every myth humanity ever told began with visitors, gods, angels, ancestors, teachers. They arrived, offered wisdom or warning, and then left. What if those weren't stories at all, but memories, echoes of encounters we've forgotten how to interpret? SETI avoided such speculation, clinging to data. But even data began to sound emotional when the signals aligned too perfectly, when the jets pulsed in harmony with the sun's flares, when the reflection curves started forming sequences that looked almost deliberate, almost like responses. They weren't random, they weren't chaotic, they were conversational. It was then that the public imagination split in two. Half the world believed the object was benevolent, a cosmic guardian, maybe a guide. The other half saw manipulation, something pretending to be harmless, hiding intelligence beneath beauty. Every civilization projects itself onto the unknown. The hopeful sea saviors, the fearful sea predators, but maybe, just maybe, both were wrong. Maybe what we were witnessing wasn't good or evil, just function. A machine doesn't need morality, it needs purpose, and if this object had one, it might not even involve us at all. The unsettling part wasn't the possibility that it was studying us. It was the possibility that we were irrelevant, that the great glowing presence in our sky wasn't here to communicate, but simply to pass through, as indifferent to our existence as the tide is to a single grain of sand. Yet even indifference can change a world. People started to behave differently. Political noise dimmed, if only for a moment. Stock markets froze as if the world collectively held its breath. Religious leaders declared it a sign. Scientists called it data. But for the first time in history, both were talking about the same thing. Something beyond us. Something undeniably real. And that perhaps was what it wanted all along. To remind us of scale. Because sometimes the most profound lessons come disguised as silence. Still, others refuse to accept passivity. A coalition of scientists and engineers proposed a message, not in radio, not in light, but in mathematics. A pulse sent in binary, carrying a single constant. P. The universal language of circles, the geometry of all motion. If Atlas was listening, that number would mean something. The transmission was sent quietly, with no fanfare, no announcement. A whisper from a species trying to answer a question it didn't understand. And then nothing. No pulse, no change in light. Days passed, then weeks. People began to laugh at the idea of waiting for a reply. If it wanted to talk, it already would have. Skepticism returned, sharp and smug. The universe, they said, had better things to do than text us back. But those who'd been watching from the start knew better. Because communication isn't always a matter of words. Sometimes silence is the response. And on the morning of December 3rd, telescopes recorded something subtle. A shift in the orientation of the jets, the 16 points realigned, forming a faint pattern when seen from Earth. A spiral, coiling inward, vanishing into itself. Not random, not chaotic, beautiful, and unmistakably deliberate. The pattern lasted for 7 hours, then dissolved back into the tail, never to appear again. The meaning? No one agreed. Some saw it as acknowledgement, a cosmic nod, a simple message received. Others saw it as warning, a spiral collapsing inwards, like a system consuming itself. Both interpretations said more about us than about it. That's the strange truth of contact. It doesn't reveal the other, it reveals you. Maybe that's what it wanted. Not to teach, not to threaten, not to save, but to show. To hold up a mirror and let us decide what we see. Whether we recognize beauty or danger, meaning or accident, love or indifference, all of it, every interpretation, comes from us. Perhaps that's the test. Not whether we're alone, but whether we can look at the unknown without fear. Whether we can face the infinite and not immediately turn it into a reflection of our own ego. Because maybe civilizations don't fail when they're destroyed. Maybe they fail when they stop wondering. And as 3i Atlas drifted past the line of Earth's orbit, its light dimming into the long cold between stars, one final thought burned in the mind of every watcher who had followed its path. Whatever it was, whatever it wanted, it had already taken what it came for. Not our data, not our attention, our wonder. And that was something we gave freely. The object was gone from the headlines, but not from the world. Its faint blue trace still drifted across the edge of the night sky. Small, steady, impossible to ignore. But what remained behind on Earth was something far more powerful than light. It was division. For months, humanity had shared one moment of wonder, and now that unity began to fracture. Everyone wanted to own the story. Governments called it a natural anomaly. Churches called it a sign. Corporations quietly registered trademarks for its name. Even nations that had never looked up before began fighting over who had seen it first. It was as if the mirror that once showed us our potential now reflected only our fear. The first official summit to discuss the Atlas event took place in Geneva. Scientists, politicians, philosophers all gathered beneath a dome of artificial stars, pretending the real ones weren't watching. The arguments began before the lights even dimmed. Who speaks for Earth? Who answers the next signal if it comes? Who owns the sky? There were no answers, only noise. A linguist from Japan stood and asked quietly, "Why do we assume it spoke to us?" The room fell silent for a moment, and then chaos returned. Because the question struck too deep. It forced everyone to confront the possibility that maybe we weren't chosen, we were just witnesses. That thought frightened people more than any invasion ever could. When you believe something is coming for you, you can prepare. But when you realize the universe simply doesn't need you, that's when the real fear begins. And yet, among all that noise, small pockets of calm emerged. In classrooms and observatories, children watched the blue spark fade and whispered to each other that maybe, just maybe, it had liked us. Not in the way we understand affection, but in the way light touches everything without asking permission. That innocence was the closest thing to truth anyone had spoken in months. Meanwhile, the data from the final observation run was still being decoded. 16 fragments, 16 steady points, all fading in unison, as if following a script. The pattern was perfect until the last moment, when one light flickered out of rhythm, briefly, like a missed heartbeat. Some said it was random. Others called it symbolic, the imperfection of something designed to speak to imperfect beings. Either way, it reminded everyone that perfection was never the point. Around the world, cultures began writing their own endings. One religion called it the traveller, another the silent teacher. In some cities, people gathered on rooftops just to stare at the patch of sky it had crossed, as if hoping to feel the warmth of its passing. And in that quiet, a truth began to form. Maybe the test wasn't about intelligence. Maybe it was about grace. How do you face something that humbles you without worshipping it? How do you acknowledge beauty without claiming ownership of it? How do you see proof of vastness and not immediately make it about yourself? Those were the questions no one wanted to answer because they required something rarer than science: humility. A philosopher from Brazil said it best on a late-night broadcast watched by millions. If we cannot share the wonder of one object without tearing ourselves apart, then we are not ready for the next one. Her words lingered long after the broadcast ended. In the days that followed, protests erupted, not against the object, but against silence. People demanded transparency, demanded truth. They wanted certainty in a story that refused to give it. But the scientists had none to offer. The data was what it was, a riddle written in motion. And so humanity did what it always does when faced with the unknown. It created stories. Some claimed the object had been a warning. Others believed it had healed something in the Earth's magnetic field. A few swore they could still hear faint pulses in the static between radio frequencies. Ghost signals, like echoes of a voice that had already moved on. The truth, as always, was quieter. The object had come. It had shown us order in chaos, purpose in silence, reflection in distance, and then it had left. It didn't need to take anything because what it offered was already ours, perspective. And maybe that was the test all along. Not whether we could solve the mystery, but whether we could live with it. Whether we could stand in front of the infinite and say, "We don't know," without breaking. For some, that humility became faith. For others, it became fear. But for a few, the ones who stayed up at night replaying the data, tracing the spiral in the sky, it became love. Love for the unknown. Love for the vastness that didn't need to explain itself. Because in the end, that's what being human has always meant. To love what terrifies you, to reach toward what will never reach back, to name the unnameable and hope it whispers your name in return. And so the summit ended without agreement. No flags were raised, no declarations made. The world went back to its noise. But something subtle had shifted, the frequency of our collective thought, the way we looked at the night. We didn't know it yet, but the test was never about contact, it was about response. And our answer, clumsy, loud, imperfect, was still unfolding. After the chaos of debate and the exhaustion of disbelief, people started wanting the object to mean something. They wanted it to save them. News anchors spoke of the visitor that watches over us. Artists painted it as a guardian angel, a perfect circle of blue fire hovering between stars. And across the world, movements formed, quiet at first, then louder, proclaiming that the Three-Eye Atlas had not just arrived, but chosen us. The new faith didn't have churches or creeds. It had live streams. It had screens that broadcast the faint shifting pulse of the object as though it were a heartbeat. When it blinks, one believer said, you can feel it inside you. And maybe in some strange way she was right, because for the first time in centuries, humanity had found something bigger than its wars, its politics, its endless noise. Something vast enough to hold all its longing. The irony was perfect. We had spent generations looking for proof that we were not alone, and the moment we found it, we tried to make it love us. Across continents, people began to gather at night. They turned off their lights and looked up, waiting for a sign, a pattern, a word. For many, it wasn't science anymore, it was communion. But hope is a dangerous thing when it grows faster than understanding. Soon the silence of the object began to sound like disappointment. Why hadn't it spoken again? Why had it stopped pulsing? What if we had failed the test? That question, whispered in desperation, became a spark. New sects rose from the ashes of wonder. Some claimed that humanity had angered the visitor by doubting. Others said it had already judged us and was preparing to return not as light, but as fire. Fear dressed itself as faith, and once again we built altars from ignorance. In the cities you could see it everywhere. Billboards showing its blue glow next to slogans about rebirth. Corporations selling products inspired by the wisdom of Atlas. Politicians using it as proof that destiny was on their side. Even the wars began to wear its name, as if heaven itself had taken sides. The same old story, replayed beneath new stars. But there were those who refused to believe. Scientists who'd watched the data from the start, who knew that the object had never promised anything, that it had simply been. One of them, a woman named Dr. Ria Karim, said in an interview, "If you look long enough at the infinite, you'll start to see yourself. That's not revelation. That's reflection." Her words were ignored, of course. Humanity has never loved its mirrors. Still, her warning lingered in the background, growing heavier with each passing week. Because behind the hope, something else had begun to unfold. A subtle pattern in the data. The faint echoes of the object's pulse seemed to correlate with solar storms, with Earth's own electromagnetic shifts. Coincidence, perhaps, or conversation? If it was responding, then maybe the connection was never meant to be emotional, but physical. Energy speaking to energy without words. And yet emotion was all we had. We projected purpose where there was none, love where there was only light. We mistook reflection for attention, rhythm for meaning. And in doing so, we revealed the oldest flaw of our species, our need to be seen. It's strange, isn't it? How quickly awe turns into possession. How easily gratitude becomes demand. We couldn't let the unknown remain unknown, we had to cage it with stories. But the object remained indifferent. It didn't bless or curse, it didn't punish disbelief or reward devotion. It just moved on, like a storm that refuses to stop for prayer. And maybe that was its lesson. Because salvation, true salvation, was never meant to come from beyond us. Maybe the only thing 3i Atlas came to teach was this, that no one is coming to save us. That the universe isn't a parent or a judge, but a mirror, vast and patient, reflecting everything we project upon it. In that reflection, we saw beauty, terror, hope, all of it ours. For some, that realization was devastating. For others, liberating. If there was no one to save us, then perhaps it was finally time to save ourselves. In the final months of observation, the object faded into the distance, its pulse growing fainter until it could no longer be distinguished from the background of space. But humanity didn't stop looking. People stared at the sky, searching for its ghost in the dark, waiting for another sign. And maybe, in that waiting, something changed. Because hope, even misplaced, is still a spark. And maybe the visitor had never come to offer answers, but to awaken the question, the one that keeps civilizations alive. The question of what comes next. Somewhere in the long hush after its departure, a child asked her mother what the blue light had been. The mother hesitated, then smiled softly. It was a reminder, she said, that we still know how to look up. And maybe that's all the salvation we ever needed. It wasn't brighter or darker, not fuller or emptier, just different. People couldn't name it, but they felt it. Something invisible had passed through us, and even after it was gone, the air seemed heavier, charged with quiet. The observatories called it post-perihelion decay. The journalists called it the farewell. But to those who had watched 3i Atlas from the beginning, it felt more like a gaze slowly withdrawing, as if the universe had turned its head away, satisfied. The object's trajectory took it farther from the sun each night. Its blue shimmer faded into a dull silver thread, then into nothing at all. Telescopes tracked it obsessively, desperate for a final sign, one last flicker, one last pulse. But the sky, for the first time in months, offered only silence. And yet, there was something in that silence. The data feeds were empty, but the instruments kept listening. It was habit now, faith wrapped in science. For weeks they pointed their dishes toward coordinates where nothing remained, measuring emptiness with devotion. And then one evening, just as the object's signal should have vanished forever, a faint distortion rippled across the background static. It wasn't a pulse, it wasn't a frequency. It was more like an echo, a soft residual shimmer buried deep in the noise. No pattern, no rhythm, just presence. It could have been cosmic dust, radio interference, or a calibration error, but to the tired eyes watching the screens at 3 a.m., it felt like something more, the last exhale of a thing that had already moved beyond reach. For a few seconds, every machine on Earth agreed. There was something there. Then it was gone. And the world, as if synchronized with the stars, went still. In the weeks that followed, scientists did what they always do. They calculated, they modeled, they wrote, they tried to explain the unexplainable. But behind their precision lay something they couldn't quantify: loss. The kind of loss that doesn't come from absence, but from knowing you've witnessed something you'll never see again. It wasn't grief exactly, more like reverence, because even if Atlas had never spoken, even if it was nothing but rock and gas and ice, it had done what no other visitor ever had. It had made us remember the scale of our own existence. And that memory was enough. On December 19th, during its closest theoretical approach to Earth, the skies over both hemispheres cleared. No one expected to see anything. The object was already too faint. But millions looked up anyway. They gathered in open fields, on rooftops, at the edges of cities, strangers joined by silence. Someone pointed to a spot near Orion's belt and whispered, "There." And maybe it was imagination, maybe it was hope. But for a heartbeat, they all saw it. A thin blue line streaking across the dark, as if the visitor had left one final brushstroke before fading completely. The telescopes captured nothing. The cameras saw nothing. But the eyes, they did. Sometimes faith is just the ability to see what instruments cannot. For hours, the crowd stayed, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. The night deepened. People drifted home, their breaths clouding the cold air. The sky returned to what it had always been: ancient, indifferent, infinite. And yet, no one felt quite the same. For the rest of that winter, humanity behaved differently. Conversations slowed. People looked at each other longer before speaking. Even the endless stream of news and noise seemed softer, humbled by the echo of that blue silence. Something had changed in us, even if we couldn't name it. Because maybe the purpose of such moments isn't to explain, but to remind. Remind us that we live beneath a ceiling we don't understand. That somewhere, beyond the reach of everything we've built, something might still be watching, not as judge or God or friend, but as witness. And perhaps that's what all stars are, witnesses. Light that travels for eons, not to illuminate, but to observe, to record, to prove that existence, even fleeting, leaves a mark. When the final report on 3i Atlas was published, it ended with one sentence that would echo for generations. We saw something impossible. It changed nothing and everything. It was true. The world didn't stop spinning. The wars didn't end. The noise returned. But somewhere inside that noise now lived a silence, the memory of being seen. And sometimes, on clear nights when the static between frequencies drifts just right, a faint shimmer hums at the edge of the data. So faint it might be imagination. Or maybe it's a reflection, a reminder. That when we stare into the stars long enough, the stars, in their own quiet way, stare back. The kind that doesn't end, but expands. A silence big enough to hold everything that had ever been said. Months had passed since 3i Atlas disappeared beyond the range of our eyes, yet it never truly left. It remained in the stories we told, in the equations scratched on whiteboards, in the way people still paused before saying the word alone. Something had shifted, something subtle, irreversible. The scientists moved on to new projects, new data, new mysteries. But every so often, one of them would stop mid-calculation and just stare at the curve of a graph, remembering the shape of that impossible symmetry. A line that shouldn't have existed, and yet did. And that memory always brought the same question. What if the universe never meant to answer us at all? What if the act of listening was the conversation? In the months that followed, humanity began to live differently. Not perfectly, not peacefully, but aware. Our arguments still burned, our cities still glowed, our hearts still broke. But now, somewhere behind every noise, there was a pause, a breath, a reminder that the infinite had once brushed against us and left a trace. Philosophers called it the afterlight, a kind of cosmic echo that lingers in perception long after the source is gone. It wasn't proof. It wasn't evidence. It was effect. Because maybe that's all enlightenment really is, the residue of wonder. The great observatories shut down their tracking programs one by one. Budgets ran dry. Interest faded. But people kept looking up anyway. Not for answers, but for the act itself, the simple, defiant beauty of curiosity. Children learned the story in schools, how a blue traveller came from another star, showed us the limits of our knowledge, and left without a word. They were taught the facts, the composition, the trajectory, the 16 fragments. But teachers couldn't resist the poetry. They told their students that maybe it had come to make sure we still remembered how to wonder. And that was the truth, wasn't it? The moment we stop wondering is the moment the universe goes silent. In time, the story of Three-Eye Atlas became a myth, then a legend, then something softer. A memory folded into the rhythm of human thought. Generations would come and go, but the image of that blue shimmer would remain, like a bookmark left in the pages of history to remind us where awe began. And maybe someday, far from now, when another civilization looks up from its own chaos and sees a faint glimmer crossing its sky, they'll feel the same thing we did. They'll call it a sign. They'll argue, worship, calculate. And they'll never know that the signal they're watching is us. Because everything that exists leaves traces, even stories. Maybe we became the message. The Voyager probes are still out there, drifting past the light of the sun, carrying our songs and our math and our faces, tiny messengers made by hands that believed in connection. Perhaps Three-Eye Atlas was the universe's way of saying, I heard you. If so, then contact wasn't an event, it was a mirror. We sent our longing into the dark, and the dark, in its own patient language, sent longing back. That's what makes this story different from all the others. Not that we found someone, but that we finally saw ourselves clearly enough to understand what we'd been searching for. Not gods, not saviours, just company. Because the deepest fear of any species isn't extinction, it's isolation. We built temples to the stars because we wanted them to notice us. But the stars were never silent. We simply hadn't learned to listen. Now, at last, we had. And once you learn to listen, everything speaks. The hum of radiation between galaxies, the whisper of particles brushing past your skin, the quiet orbit of a planet that doesn't know your name. All of it becomes dialogue. All of it says, you belong here. That was the final gift, not salvation, not warning, belonging. Because the truth is simple and unbearable in its simplicity. We are not the question anymore. We are the answer. The object may have vanished, but the reflection it left remains. Not in space, but in us. In every act of kindness, in every scientific dream, in every small hand raised toward the night sky, asking nothing but to see. Maybe one day we'll send another signal, not out of desperation, but gratitude. And maybe the stars will flicker again, not to reply, but to smile. Until then, we keep watching. We keep building telescopes and stories and hope. Because hope is the engine of the cosmos. It burns quietly, endlessly, without fuel. And when someone far away looks up at their own sky and sees a tiny blue spark moving between the stars, they'll wonder what it means. They'll write their own theories, their own prayers, their own myths. And that's when they'll realize what we did, that the universe doesn't send answers. It sends questions that become answers in the hearts of those who dare to ask them. That the cosmos doesn't speak in words, it speaks in reflections, and that sometimes the most profound form of communication is existence itself. We are here. We are aware. We are the answer.